Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our very first virtual club meeting today. Uh, this is kind of some weird times we've been going through, and I hope this video finds everybody happy, healthy, and well. We got been asked to do a bunch of strange stuff that kind of out of our comfort zone, like wear masks and uh, rubber gloves and go on scavenger hunt for toilet paper. And the other day I saw a post for it showed a middle-aged couple, and they had a calendar up there that said 2057, and the man turns to the woman and says, "We're finally using the last roll of toilet paper Mom and Dad bought in 2020." So we're gonna. I want to give a shout out to our new members. Some of these might have been to a meeting. We had Danny Scotia, Patrick Rowland, and Steve Fredkin. They were in February. And March, we had John Brower and Beth Prudy. And in April, we had Roy Ulrich, and I think Jerry Nansen, he joined us the other night. So just want to let you guys know that for the people that haven't been to a meeting or anybody out there, that because of what we're going through right now, we need to start using the sources that we can do, and that would be we have Facebook going, we have our Google group, and so any questions you have, feel free to throw an email out there and ask the question. We had a person call up about using a one-way coring system, and Ken Waller helped him out. So we want to maintain this mentorship. So we want to keep all that going. So that's pretty much all I have. We'll turn this back over to Jerry, and we'll get the demo started.
Cool, thanks, Jim. Hi, Dale.
Hi, I'm up. Okay. I guess I don't need to yell. I don't have to. I'm used to talking to a room full of 50 people, so this is going to be a little bit new for me too. For those of you who do know me, hi again. Haven't been around in several years doing a demo, so I hope you find this halfway interesting. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dale Gillaspy. I've been with the club for quite a while. Served in several different capacities, and I was asked to come back and do a little demo this year. So I'm going to concentrate today not so much on turning, but on some different embellishments. And the whole goal is not to make you experts at any one particular embellishment, but to give you an overview. How many round and brown people are out there by show of hands? I'm kidding. I'm kidding. This is a bit of a challenge because I'm used to that feedback, that immediate feedback. But for those of you who are round and brown people, and what I mean by that are kind of purists at heart, and wood should be round bowls and not off center and not embellished, there's definitely room for that. I'm not knocking it. But I think there are some things we can do to enhance sometimes plain pieces of wood, and even more interesting figured pieces of wood that, sometimes it just calls for that little extra. I'll try and give credit where credit's due as I go along, because none of these are absolutely original ideas. So to start with, I've turned.
Dale, just want to bring up one thing. If you do have, Dale's used to having feedback, and we will allow you feedback. We want to solicit feedback. So if you can, use the chat feature on Zoom. Down on the bottom, there's a little thought bubble kind of thing. You can chat. You can ask questions that way. that then we can relay it to Dale, and then we're gonna try to stop, you know, in 15 or 20 minutes or so, or after some particular, you know, feature that Dale is doing, and, you know, raise your hand, use the Zoom feature to raise your hand, and we have the capability to unmute your mic so you can actually talk to Dale and ask him those questions. So there will be a chance for feedback, and we'll see how this goes.
That'd be awesome. First of all, I want to give a shout out. I don't think he's watching today. Technology is not his thing, but I went over to Larry Hudson's last night, and a bunch of the pre-turning I've done at Larry's. So thank you, Larry, for that. What I've done right now is to turn a spindle. It's ash, it's got open grain, which for this particular technique is important. An ash, a white oak, something that has that open grain, that kind of porous feature. This is a small tool handle or some facsimile thereof. There's no hole drilled in the end of it yet, but for what we're doing, you get the idea. You can do a small screwdriver handle, a kitchen utensil handle, a tool handle, you name it. As a backup, I turned a little mini rolling pin. There we go. A little mini rolling pin, which would work for decoration for the same technique. So with that being said, I want to talk just a little bit about safety before we get started. I'm going right back. No, leave it there, because I'm going right back to standing up, and we'll do this in just a minute. But I'm going to do some things some of you may feel comfortable with, some of you may not. Jim was just talking about, you know, the masks and eye protection and all that kind of stuff. So here's what I want to say about safety. Okay. Personal protective equipment, glasses, gloves, all that kind of stuff is a last line of defense and not a first line of defense. In everything I do, there's precautions that have been taken off camera. We're going to be dealing with fire on a limited basis here. There's no shavings around. There's no dust around. Everything's been clean there. I've got water standing by just in case, but we're not going to let it get that out of hand. Plus, I feel comfortable dealing with fire. I've been doing it for the last 25 years of my job. The AAW doesn't permit certain things. We won't be dealing with electricity today. We won't be doing any of that, but just as an example, it can be done with some safety, it can be done safely if certain precautions are taken and you know what you're doing. The AAW has chosen to not allow it at any of their sponsored functions, and they have that right. They're the sponsoring, they're the insuring organization. They're looking out for, you know, for the crowd, so to speak, for the large groups. So I support that wholeheartedly. My point being, if we get to anything that you're not comfortable with, right? Jimmy Clues turns at unbelievable speeds that I don't feel comfortable turning. I wouldn't turn them at that. If you don't feel comfortable using a torch, don't use a torch. You know, find something else or springboard off of this idea to do what you want to do, okay? So there's my little talk about safety. So that being said, anytime I'm doing actual turning, I will be wearing the face shield. Anytime that I'm not going to be turning and we're just doing ancillary things, I've got some safety glasses on as a precaution. So here's what we're going to do. I've got an open grain wood, and like I said, I've got a propane torch. It's the click on, click off, pretty straightforward. We're going to start by heating the wood, and you can see already, if we can get down there, just all you got to do is barely touch it with the torch, and it starts burning away the softer grain. We want to go deeper than that, so we're going to preheat. We're going to keep working up so we don't heat any one section of wood too much. You'll see a little smoke. It's okay. It's still not, I can touch it, okay? We're going to preheat the wood, then we're going to go back. We really want a deep scorch. Now, could I catch this wood on fire to where it would sustain fire with this? Yeah, technically I could, but it would take a long, long time. I understand a lot about fire behavior, so I'm very, very comfortable doing this and stopping where I need to. Now you see it, if you can see, it starts to glow red. As soon as I take the flame away, it doesn't sustain combustion, it goes away. And I want you to understand how much I'm heating it. It does give a little bit of a pungent aroma in here. But we're heating this to really the point where we're getting all of the soft growth rings away. I'm just going to change hands here.
You're good.
Okay. There. That last little part. We've heated it, we've gone back to where you could see the red glow in the growth rings. And what we've done is to get rid of all that. Okay, we're done with the torch. Okay, no more burning. Now I'm going to use a product. I'm going to put some gloves on for this, just because it gets a little bit messy. I'm going to use a product called Rub and Buff.
Pelican's right there.
Hold on. There you go.
All right, you'll see that. Rub and Buff. Oh, I've got a bag too for your ways. I got, I'll talk about that in just a second. This comes in a bunch of different colors. I have a copper, I have a silver, and I have a white. I think I'm gonna go with the white because it's such a nice contrast to what's going on with the black. If it wants to come out, if not, maybe I'll use the silver. Yep, we're gonna use the silver today. So I'm gonna do a couple of things as we get going here. I'm gonna protect the ways of the lathe. I don't wanna drip anything on the lathe, although this is more of a cream than liquid. I'm gonna put a plastic bag over the ways of the lathe. I'm gonna take just a little bit of sanding sealer and just touch this, just lightly. Not a big deal at all. Just enough, I'm not gonna get a bunch of this rub and buff where I don't want it. So now I'm gonna take this just with my finger. And we're gonna start rubbing it in. And the wood is still warm. Not too uncomfortable to touch, but it's definitely still warm. And I want to work this down into that green pretty good. And if you felt that if you started to do this, it really helps to do it when the wood is warm. It does help kind of draw this cream down into those open pores of the wood. If for some reason you felt it was too warm for your taste and you didn't like the finger, you take a little bit on a cloth and it does the same thing. All right, get it down in there. If it doesn't get 100%, that's okay, because we're going to come back here in just a second. So I'm going to put the cap back on this so I don't make a mess. Just a second here. Now, I'm going to take a clean cloth and some Danish oil, just some regular. I will get better at this. Aha. I will get better at this. Just some regular Danish oil. Okay, so we'll put a little on this cloth. It doesn't take a ton, and start wiping away. The only thing this does is it does go through cloth quite a bit, because as soon as your cloth gets saturated, you need to move to a new piece of cloth so that you're not re-rubbing it on the same place. Let me grab some more cloth. And we'll just concentrate kind of on one area. We'll go through and do the whole thing. But as you can see, that this is coming off, and we're getting back down to our charred wood. You can also use paper towels. I just happen to have a bunch of old t-shirts cut up, so it was convenient. But if you're going to be doing a lot of this, you go through a lot of them, so there's nothing wrong with using paper towels. They don't come apart that easily in the oil. They hold together fairly well. I also like the blue mechanics type shop towels. Hold up even a little better than like a household paper towel. All right, a little more of this. Another cloth or two of this to give you an idea, and then we'll move on. So you get an idea. I don't know how well the camera's picking up the color difference, because on this monitor I'm looking at, it really looks as if it's all silver, but when you're looking at it in person, you really see the black in between, and this silver is even making the grain here look white. So I don't sit and bore you guys by just sitting and wiping this. You get the idea. So what I'd like to do now is move on. See, if you wipe some of it out of the grain, that's okay, because here's what we're going to do.
Dale, the question is coming, do you have any handouts for any of this stuff?
I actually do. I've done this demo a couple different times, a couple different clubs. So I have specific demos. I'll be happy, or specific handouts, thank you. And I would be happy to forward those on to whoever.
If you give them the patch, you can distribute them.
Okay, perfect. All right. My white's being a little bit stubborn. My copper's being a little... Never mind, got it. So I'm going to take a little bit of copper now. At one point I did a whole demo just on handles, and we did the actual turning, and we started out with a little screwdriver handle, kitchen utensil handle, and then went up to turning tool handles, and we looked at all sorts of different ways to do ferrules and making handles that ergonomically work for you, and all that kind of stuff. So I've added some copper.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. The glare doesn't show really well. But anyway, for wherever the silver didn't get down into the pores of that, I've added some copper. So now we'll just come back and we'll do the same thing. And we'll rub off.
Actually, you're making the glare with these. So
Oh, okay.
Show it, just move one of these and.
Oh, perfect. Oh, that's better. Yeah, okay.
Turn it off or whatever. There's quite a bit of light in here.
Any other questions coming in?
No, not so far.
Everybody's off.
They're mesmerized.
They go in the fridge for a beer is what they've done. This whole remote thing does have its benefits. So anyway, like I said, the whole idea was to give you the idea. So if you can, I'm going to turn this a little bit so you can maybe see the color a little bit. Right now we've got a blend of silvers, whites, and coppers in this. So the nice thing about doing this is you can make handles. I've got one here that I colored quite a while ago, but this works for me, and it's big for a spindle gouge, but I got big hands. So I was able to turn it the size of my hand. I put a brass ferrule on the end. I put texturing on both ends of it, colored it red, and then filled in the pores with a black. And it's gotten used. It's beat up and dinged and got super glue on it and all sorts of wonderful things. Now, at one time, it was a nice looking handle, but it's mine, and nobody's ever going to mistake it. You know, there's nothing wrong with commercial handles, but no one's ever going to mistake this for somebody else's, and this is so ugly that no one else is going to want to take it. So there we go. So there's just a brief overview on one way that you can color stuff, use some creams. There's a lot of different gilt creams. Jimmy Clues has one. There's a place called, I think, Woodworks of Texas, that he has his name on some creams that work like this. I use the Rub and Buff available at local hobby stores. I think it works fine. It comes in about 10 or 12 different colors. I just happened to pick a couple. You don't have to use black by any means. I just used black on this just from the simple standpoint that it shows contrast when you have the deep grain, all right? So there's that. Now, if you'll give me just a second, I'm going to swap this out and I'm going to put on a hollow form. And what do I do with my... There it is. And a chuck key. So I said I'm going to use this piece. I'm not sure if it is. We may have to swap this chuck out. Nope, she's going to fit. All right. We'll bring the tailstock up for a little support. But we're not really going to be doing any pressure on this. This is simply a piece. I was told it's something called P2, P-I-T-U, out of South America. It looks a lot like citrus that you'd find here, but it turned great. I turned a hollow shape form, didn't hollow it out. It was strictly for the form to give you kind of the overview of the form. I'm going to continue on the burning realm of things, but not with flame. I'm going to move to first a friction burn, and then we'll deal with some pyrography for a minute. What do I mean by a friction burn? Well, I was looking for a way to kind of do some stuff and put my own signature on it. And I'd seen, you know, wire burning and things like that, but how do I make it special? So I thought, I'm kind of musical. How do we make a musical staff? So I think around the outside of this today, we're going to put a small musical staff, and I'll show you how I burn some notes into things. So first of all, how do we get our lines even? So we want to put 5 evenly spaced lines across this. You can put them anywhere you want, usually about 2/3 of the way up. Just below this shoulder is a nice place for them to look. We want those lines to be evenly spaced. They're going to have to be pretty tight, close together, or else our musical notes are going to have to be 1/4 of an inch, you know, in diameter in order for this to work. So how do we do that? We can measure it's a pretty precise measurement, and I'm not that precise of a guy. That's why we were talking earlier. That's why I got into turning this, because I don't have to measure anything. So,
Hey, Dale,
yes.
one question did come
Yes.
in about
Question.
the prior piece.
Okay.
You have to put a top coat on it after you do the
No, you don't. You can take a little bit of spray lacquer, just like the sanding sealer. You can put a little bit of spray lacquer over, but anything you use as a top coat, eventually you're going to wear off because you're putting your hands on it. Once this stuff dries, it's not going to come off on your hands.
Cool.
So I would, if anything, I would put a couple of coats of oil, let that oil penetrate, and let this beyond dry, let it cure for a couple days. It's not going to come off on your hands. So yeah, anything like a polyurethane, a lacquer, anything like that over time is going to come off on your hands, and you'll have to refinish it. Good question. All right. So what I came up with is a beading tool, and this is a commercially available beading tool. And so instead of, you want to turn really tight beads, instead of having to turn them yourself, you use this tool upside down, kind of use it as a scraper and push it in, and it'll wind up forming shallow beads.
on the overhead. Look at the
Wind up. Ta-da. You see that spacing in there? So if you use that as a scraper, you push it in to the piece like this, and it'll form a shallow bead. I'm not really interested in forming a shallow bead, but what this does, if we just touch this and don't go in very far, and then I'll show you, we can go from one. That's pretty true. I turned this last night. So we'll turn our speed up a little bit. We decide where our lines are going to be. So if I want my top line to be about right here, I'm just going to touch this. You see one line up here. You see two line. Now I'm just going to go in just a little bit. I'm not going to form a bead. Just going to go in enough to make a little groove. All right? So we need 5 lines on our musical staff. Those are the first 2 lines. So now I'm going to take one leg of this scraper and line it up with the other line and come and touch my other leg. There's my third. My fourth. And my fifth. And those are all pretty uniformly deep. I have 5 lines to my musical staff. And a little shallow. This piece isn't quite true. It moved a little bit overnight, but that's okay. It's close enough. So how are we going to get lines in the piece? You've probably all seen these. This is a thin piece of wire. This one's available at Craft Supplies. It's got 2 balls on it for handles, so you can put a little tension on it. But the bottom line is you can do this at home with wire. You can hold it with a pair of pliers. I wouldn't recommend holding it in your hands. Okay. The only thing I would caution you on is we're going to pull the tool rest out of the way, and I'm not going to put my hand down here. I'm going to keep everything over the top, because if for some reason this catches, the worst it's going to do is fly back this way and hit me in the nose. I'm not that good looking anyway. It's going to be fine. If I were to have my hand down here and for something and this would catch, it could pull my hand underneath the lathe and bad things would happen and the demo would have to be over for the day. So we'll get this going. The first one's going to take a little longer because we have to preheat that wire. So we want to get a pretty good burn. And all I'm doing here is I'm not putting any pressure on it. I'm barely touching the piece until I feel it seat in that groove. And once I feel it seat in that groove, I'm just pulling down with my outside hand and giving it a little friction. And now we have 5 concentric lines. For those of you who know anything about music or familiar with looking at music, those are the 5 lines of your musical staff. Now comes the next part. Remember I told you I'm going to give, ooh, that's hot. We don't want to do that. I told you I'm going to give credit where credit is due. The first thing I'm going to do is give credit to Molly Winton. For those of you who've don't know Molly's work, look it up. I saw her burning and was really impressed by her work, but didn't want to copy it. I thought, how can I kind of make this my own? And that's where this was burned from. Molly doesn't do a whole lot of burning anymore. So while we're on the topic of safety, Molly has kind of transitioned to pottery and does very little turning and burning anymore. She did so much burning and branding on her pieces, which we'll talk about earlier, even trying to take precautions, trying to blow the smoke away, wearing masks and things like that. Over time, she developed a sensitivity to the smoke and gets migraine every time she tries to do this. And she said even if she wears a mask, has a fan, it gets in her clothes, as soon as she takes her mask off, she winds up with migraine. So she's kind of had to shift what she does, but she does great work and it inspired me. So this is a skew pen. For those of you who know anything about pyrography or familiar with wood burning pens, it's just a flat pen. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the different lines, okay, in here.
Watch the monitor so you can see what's on.
There we go. So, whoops, I just touched it to the wood. So normally I would take this piece off and sit it in my lap and cradle it in my hand and do it in my lap. It'd be much more ergonomically friendly, but the camera can't see it very well that way. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a treble clef. So for those of you who know anything about music, we're going to put, this is our musical staff. This is a double line which signifies the end of the piece. So then we're going to come over and we're going to take a line and we're just going to do a straight line down this way. Then we're going to we'll come around this way. It's got to go around the G line and we'll do that way. And we'll do that. Okay. Not perfect, but yeah, it will certainly, so there's our treble clef. So for those of you who are artists, you do a better job than I would, but that's treble clef. So the next thing we're going to do is we have to put individual lines vertically on all this to signify the different measures. So when you're counting, when you're reading music, you know what measure is what. So instead of using that same tool and just drawing a straight line, if I had gone a little bit deeper here, like we talked about, I would have wound up with beads. And so what I've done is I've got this little, it's like a fish scaling tool, and it's round. There. It's kind of round. You see that?
Yep.
Okay. So what that'll do is, if I want my first measure here, this is the same width as that beading tool we used earlier. So I can touch here, I can touch here, I can touch here, I can touch here. And I can move on to my next measure and I can do the same thing. And the reason I'm showing you this now, I could have used that straight skew tool, but if I had gone a little bit deeper and made these beads, I don't want to slice that bead. It's like the little bumps, the traffic bumps they put in the traffic humps, right? They've got those flat spots in between. I would want the beads to be consistent. So by using this round tool, I would allow the beads to be consistent. So I would just go through and I would make my measures. Now, if I was doing this for a real piece, I would have measured the circumference of the piece, figured out how many measures of the song I wanted to put in, done the math, and figured out how long these lines need to, or how far these lines need to be apart, and would have done it. But for demo purposes, there we have our lines. Now, so much for that. The next thing we have to do is put our musical notes in. So for those of you who don't know about music, there's a lot of different kinds of notes, but basically there's some solid ones and then there's some hollow ones. Quarter notes, 16th notes, whole notes, half notes, that type of thing. Okay. So what I've done here is I've got this little tool that's just a round ball. It looks like a BB with the heating element going through it. So I've got to turn my heat up just a little bit on this particular one to get it to do its thing, give it a chance to heat up. And it's heating up. So I would look at that sheet of music. I personally go through with a pencil and mark out the notes if I want an actual song so that I'm not guessing. So I take a little pencil and I draw out the actual notes of where I'm going. But for today, we're just going to burn some notes like that into our piece. And then what's that you say? That's great, but what about those little round ones? How would we possibly get the open notes, the whole notes, the half notes? How are we going to do that? Well, the good news is somebody a lot smarter than me thought of that, and this is basically a little tiny tube on the end of the heating element, so that when we come in here, this needs to get a little hotter. These particular tools take a little bit longer to heat up.
Dale, at some point, show the burn master on the screen. So
Oh, perfect.
see
Okay.
what equipment you're using.
Okay, so just throwing a few things in there so you get an idea. So now you can see we have open notes, we have solid notes. Now, last but not least, when you look at a piece of sheet music, they all have little flags, little tails on them. How embellished those little tails are kind of depend on, kind of tell us what kind of notes they are. So again, I'm gonna come in kind of sideways and see if I can do this. Whoops. A little bit off on that one. But there you go. Everybody see that okay? Okay. I think this is a good time to show you the Burn Master. So I will see if I can lift that up.
Well, maybe move over here so you
There's a lot of different, let's knock all this stuff off the table, Dale. There are a lot of different brands out there. I did my research. I like this brand. If you're not going to do it very much, there's a lot more inexpensive brands you can actually start with. I did my research and decided this was something I was going to use for a while, so I thought I would.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There.
Show there.
It's there. So this is the one I got. It's probably a middle of the road brand. There's, like I say, there's entry level ones. There are a lot more expensive ones. There are ones with dual outlets, so you can have two different pins hot at the same time. The only thing that I would steer you away from and not recommend, you can go down to the hobby store and for 10 or 15 bucks, you can buy one of those huge pins with a 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch tip and swap out the little tips, and it looks like a soldering iron for wood. The problem with those, you can't interchange the pins, and you can't get a fine enough detailed head to actually do any detailed work for. Okay, so there's that. Let me plug my cords back in. I want to show you a couple little other things on burning while we're still on burning. Thanks to Miss Winton, she does a lot of branding, what's known as branding. So instead of drawing a lot of flowery pictures, she gets the tip very hot and does kind of like what we talked about here, only in different patterns. So this is one that I made following her instruction, and it's a coil, and that's all it is. Okay. So all we did is we took a piece of nichrome wire, which is wire that's designed for burning like this. We wrapped it around a nail head 5 or 6 times, cut it off, and then tucked it in the little screws. And this particular burning pin has 2 little screws that allows you to stick different tips in there.
Just hold that stuff for a second. Zoom really real close on that so you can see what
There's kind of that view.
the coils.
There's that view of the coils. Okay. You can play with these. I have got, and I just moved it. I'll find it. I've got a little pill jar with about 6 or 8 different tips in it that you just play with. You make S curves, you can make zigzags, you can make sharp lines, make anything you want and just play with it a little bit. But essentially, here's how this works. You take this and you want the tip hot. Sorry, I've got to swap adapters and things here. Okay, so you want to crank this up fairly hot, so we'll give this just a second. While we're waiting for this to heat up, let me show you this one. This is also a Molly-Winton instruction. This is a piece of, I think it's Bacote. It's a piece that I had, okay? You notice there's no tip in it, but it's got 2 little tiny set screws right there. And these came from Radio Shack, and I don't even know if there's any more Radio Shacks in business. You'd have to go to either Fry's Electronics or get these online. But it's the same end as that one, okay? I just ran a lamp cord there through to my tips, ran a lamp cord out the bottom, soldered on a 1/4 inch jack, which goes in the burning machine that we showed you earlier, okay? Screws about to come out of there. And the reason this is nice is if you're going to do a lot of burning, like let's say I'm going to burn this entire piece and just leave a little bit open, you get writer's cramp holding those little pins in your hand. But you can turn something like this, you can hold it in a position where it's more ergonomically friendly. I turned one that has more like an apple shape and drilled a hole this way, then drilled a hole this way. I can hold it this way in my hand, almost like a tennis ball, and sit and burn like this. And you tend not to get writer's cramp so bad, okay? So back to where I was at. I've got this glowing hot. So I'll just come down on this piece now and I'll make 2 different, I'll go 4, okay? So I'll make 4 indentations with that. You can see those lines there. Then if I turn this 90 degrees, I can make a crosshatch pattern. Poor connection of this adapter. Okay. But I can make a crosshatch pattern here. I can go here. There we go. For whatever reason, that's working better now. Anyway, you can do any type of pattern you want. You can come in with the fish hook, like we talked about. Let me show you a couple of cool ones here on this. Give me just a second. Let me get another pin out of here. Where did I set my other tray of pins? No, it's up. No. Anyway, all right, I'll use these. I don't know where I set it, guys. I'm sorry. Oh, here it is. The back of the table. I got all this stuff and I'm scattered out. I'm sorry about that. All right, let's use this. This is the one I was looking for. Okay. This has kind of a fishhook effect to it, but it's flat. It's very flat. So we'll find a clean piece of wood here. So
So now when you do this at home, what do you do for smoke control?
I take a fan, and again, this is Molly's idea, and I found it worked well. And so what I do is, there, I'm not going to do any more, but you get the idea of, you know, you can do just an absolute ton of things. You can go over these in little dots and make the entire thing dots, and it not only adds color, it adds texture. So when someone picks this up, it's got a textured feel to it. So to answer the question, what I do for smoke, I'm not a big face shield guy. I'm not a big respirator guy. I'm not claustrophobic, but I don't like, which is really dumb. I've been a fireman for 25 years, wear crap on my face. That's probably why I don't like to do it at home. So what I do is I take a small fan, one of the little like desktop 4-inch blade fans. Some of them have alligator clips. You can clip them to something, and some of them have little stands. And I set that on the side of me, but I don't have it blowing onto the piece, okay? If I have that fan blowing directly on the piece to blow the smoke away, it's going to cool that tip, and I'm not going to get a good burn on anything. Sorry. So I'm going to not blow that fan across. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the fan facing away from me. And so what it will do then is it will make a suction effect, and it will take the smoke, and instead of going up into my face, it will blow it out the fan. And I never do it in a closed room. I never do it in a closed shop, a closed garage. I've always got some form of outside air there as well. And we're fortunate enough here in Arizona that, you know, a vast amount of the year we've got that. I want to back up because I found these. So these are just some ones that I've played with.
In your palm is the best place.
In the palm is the best place. Stick them down in between my fingers like little tie tacks, so you can kind of see. I attempted to make one like a treble clef, so I didn't have to draw that treble clef in the musical staff on my own. I could just brand it, and it did not work well. I tried about 8 times before I said, forget that, we'll give up. But it gives you a little idea of just different ways you can play. Take that wire and just go for it. And who knows, may come up with something that becomes your signature brand. Okay. So there's one more area that I want to do, and I was going to change work pieces, and I don't think I need to on this. I'm going to continue on this piece. So we can take a piece of wire and we can burn around the outside of all this, okay? What if we want to burn a platter? What if we have, this is a piece that I'm going to use a little bit later on for something else, but what if we want to take this face of the platter and we want to burn our musical lines around that so you can see it when you have it sitting on the table and you can see the top of it? A wire is not going to work. There's no place for it to grab, okay? For today's demonstration, I think we can use the top of this hollow form so we don't have to stop and take time to change pieces. So how do I get friction burns, if you will, in the top of a piece like that? And the grain orientation doesn't matter. That other piece was face grain. This is end grain, but we still have to get something pressing in that way, and there's no way to get a wire in there. It won't bite on anything. So I'm going to take my trusty little tool here and put another couple lines in there. And I don't have to do all 5, I'll just do 3. Design-wise, try and stick with odd numbers when you can. There's something about it that is more attractive to the eye, more pleasing to the eye. So what are we going to do then to get a friction burn in there? If you go to your local home improvement store, hardware store, and go to the countertop, the kitchen countertop section, and get a piece of Formica sample. Okay. The other alternative is if you have a really old kitchen countertop and you want your spouse to remodel that countertop, if you just go to the kitchen, you know how it gets loose underneath the edge, just snap off a piece and tell them you don't know how it went away. No, don't tell them that. They'll give me dirty looks here in the shop. But if you're remodeling, if you're getting rid of a countertop, and you're going to throw it away anyway, snap off a piece. Other than that, go to your local home improvement store and just take a piece of countertop and then take it over to the sander. And you see right down here, the color's gone away. I went over to the belt sander and I sanded this down to a fine point. If you just try and shove this end in, that's 2 or 3 times as thick as it needs to be to want to get down in that. You'll burn the sides of the ridge or the sides of the channel and not the bottom, and it'll look really odd. So I'm going to hold this by hand. I'm comfortable doing that, okay? If you're not, take a pair of vice grips and grab onto it this way so it's got a little torque, some way for it to hit, something like that. Don't feel like you have to hold on to this by hand by any stretch, okay? But I'm going to hold on to this by hand. I'm going to come inside here. And again, generate just a little bit of heat. Get down in there. I'm kind of close to the tailstock here in this particular. There. Now, one more thing that I did not bring. Maybe I did. I did. I'm going to show you one more trick. 91% isopropyl alcohol. If you go to your local drugstore, they have 2 concentrations sitting there. They have an 81% and they have a 91% isopropyl alcohol. The 80% is too much water. It'll raise the grain, won't do a good job. But if you take the 91% alcohol and you take a rag, you see all this shadow on there? Every time you burn it, it gives that little scorch, that little shadow. If you take a little alcohol, you see it on the rag. It comes right off on the rag. I'm just stinking it up in here today. We go from smoke to rubbing alcohol. And we'll let that dry a little bit. Same thing with any of the scorch marks we made here. Just take a little alcohol. Doesn't take a whole lot. And wipe all those little shadow lines away. You'll wind up with a much cleaner looking piece. Give that a chance to dry. And once that dries, we'll come back to it. I'll show you that it gives you a much cleaner looking piece. The only hint that I'll tell you on this particular one, if you're going to do this, we almost waited too long. don't wait more than 5 or 10 minutes before you stop what you're doing, take some alcohol and rub. What I've found is that if you wait too long, it seeps in the wood and stains the wood instead of just getting that kind of smoky, overburned shadow on it, and it stains the wood and you won't get it off, or it'll be much more difficult to get it off. So take breaks frequently, turn to the alcohol and burn that. This is drying up. You can kind of see already how that's come into play. All right, questions so far?
Can you just lightly sand it?
You probably could, but you're going to risk damaging what you've done here. And if you've got the ridges, you're going to take those ridges, you're going to flatten them a little bit, and you're going to get down into the scorch mark, and they're not going to be consistent. So
You use denatured alcohol?
I don't know. I've never tried. That would be good. The question was, can you use denatured alcohol? And I'm going straight off Molly Winton's technique. If somebody would want to try that, I would be very interested in knowing if that would work. I just keep a little bottle. I keep kind of all my burning stuff in one little thing together. So when I take it out, I have it there. Grab a sip of water. All right. Any more questions? Please, because this is going along rather quickly. Okay.
Well, so at some point we have show and tell. We can take a
Right.
and take 20 minutes off and do that.
Okay.
And kind of your choice when you want that to occur.
Let's, I got a couple more things I'd like to do. So let's, I want to talk through one thing and I want to start it and then we'll come back to it. So let me start this. Let me talk through the technique. Then maybe we can take a little break. I can reset up for some other things and make sure all my ducks are in a row that we can come back to it. Okay. So, and to give you a little teaser for the rest of the day. So I'm going to talk through this one particular technique. I'm going to kind of get it set up. The next thing I'm going to talk about, I've got another hollow form here that we're going to talk about adding a copper strip. And it's more complex than the time will allow, so we're going to do part of it. And I usually do this with an already hollow form, and I didn't have the time to hollow it out. So we're going to, again, talk through the technique, and I want you to understand how it's done, because I think you could do some really cool things with it, take it beyond where I'm going to go. And then the last thing we're going to talk about today, we'll wind up things, coloring. And I color with kind of a Jimmy Clues technique in mind, and I give Jimmy all the credit for this because he's the very first professional turner I ever saw, and I liked his way of doing things. This particular piece is colored only on the inside. So it's dusty, it's needs probably another coat of oil and certainly needs dusted off, as the camera will show down there. But that being said, if you can look at the inside of there and you can see there's a lot of greens and blues on the inside of that piece, okay? So if anybody thinks they know how I got the color like it, once we do the technique, answer the question, because there's a lot of sanding. You put color on, we're gonna put color on, sand it off, put it on, sand it off, get about 6 different layers. So if anybody wants to harbor a guess as to how I got that down inside there, that'd be interesting to hear a little feedback. Let me show you another piece I did, and I'll show you the mistake I made. This piece I colored, and I decided it wasn't enough, so I took, and again, it's dusty, sorry about that. I took copper leaf and silver leaf and a little outline of a fish, and I put the representation of a fish to kind of give an aquarium type feel to this piece. And then I patinaed the copper, okay? Then a friend came along and said, it needs something to anchor it, so I put in a little bit of seaweed. But then I wrapped the piece in bubble wrap, and this is finished with lacquer, spray lacquer. Then I wrapped the piece in bubble wrap, and if you can see, I'll show my mistakes and show what you see that. That's what happens when you wrap a piece in bubble wrap. and leave it in a package in your garage in Arizona in the summer, okay? Don't make the same mistake I did. I'm trying to convince people this adds character to the piece. Haven't been able to convince anybody of that yet. So the next step is to try and just sand the lacquer off, get back down to the original material and refinish it. But I brought this piece because I wanted to give you an idea of what can be done when you start combining some of the different techniques. Because the whole idea for today is to get your mind working and allow you to springboard and go off and do really, really cool things, okay? So that being said.
So Dale, we can get a couple of questions.
Sure.
So, Brian Lindsay wondered if rather than using sandpaper, could you use maroon colored Scotch-Brite pad to clean the overburn?
I don't know.
Okay, so Brian can experiment with it.
Brian, yeah. Along with the denatured alcohol, you guys get together, run a little experiment. My fear is it wouldn't be aggressive enough, but I don't know. It'd be very interesting. I've never tried it. Good question.
And then Dave, George wondered what material you use to make the tips. The nichrome wire.
It's nichrome wire. If you go to Radio Shack or Fry's Electronics or now any number of online sources, I've had my wire for literally years and years and years. I'll show it to you. It comes in different gauges. There we go. Comes in different gauges. And I bought the smallest rolls I could find is probably 10 feet or 12 feet or something like that of each of the gauges. And I've had this for 10 years. Every once in a while, I take a little bit off and experiment and try a little bit, wrap it around a nail head, something like that. But that's 18 gauge wire. This, I think I have it marked here. That's 20. So 18 and 20 gauge wire. And that's exactly what it looks like. The only thing that I didn't mention earlier, once you get a shape you like, you want to put it in that pen and heat it up. Get it to a glowing red. You're essentially going to temper it. So you get it to a bright glowing red, turn it off, let it cool back down. If you go on Molly Winton's website, her website is Turning Maven, M-A-V-E-N, all one word, turningmaven.com. I don't know if I think she still has her pamphlets for sale for $5. It's a little pamphlet that gives detailed instructions on all this stuff, how she burns, how she makes her pens, how she makes the handles for herself that will fit her hand the way she wants to. And they're like $5. I mean, it's well worth the investment.
Graham Pruitt was also a
Graham.
resource.
I think she got a lot of her stuff because she's friends with Graham, has been for a long time. So she probably took a lot of her stuff from Graham and then springboarded, you know. And then there's the other forms of burning too. If you're not into branding, there are people that do absolutely beautiful, beautiful artwork. They look like pencil drawings and charcoal drawings and everything else with a much lower temperature and different tips. If you're into that, I mean, I can't draw a straight line with a ruler, so I won't even attempt that. But for those of you who are much more artistic than I am, try that and do it on a curved surface instead of a flat surface. So you could do some really, really, really cool things, and I'd love to see them.
So a couple other comments. One, David Dickmeyer says that denatured alcohol is only 70% alcohol.
Okay.
Take his word for it.
All right.
And then Steve Doe suggests Everclear, which is 95% alcohol.
The problem is not that much of it's going to make it to the wood. And then if you start drinking it, you shouldn't be dealing with hot tipped objects anyway. So, it's a nice thought and I like it, but all right, let's talk through this next little section of what we're going to do, kind of pave the way for later. Then we'll take a little break. I can reset with things. So what I've done is I've taken a small little piece of wood and I've turned kind of a tulip shaped what's going to be a hollow form. You note it's not hollowed out yet. In the real world, if I was doing this for good, I would have gone ahead and hollowed this. You notice I left a pretty big shoulder there, okay? And there's a reason for that. So turn a bottom shape that pleases you. You don't have to do it in this form, but this form worked for me for what I was doing, okay? You don't want to use an expensive piece of wood for this, and you'll see why in just a little bit, okay? Poplar, a glue up, something like that. This is some of that P2 that I had. It's the offcut from this piece, actually. So I just happen to have it. Turn it, needs to be dry. Now, go take a nice piece of wood, a nice burl, a nice exotic, some walnut or cherry or something domestic with a really nice figure in it, whatever you like, but something contrasting, okay? Now we're gonna turn that, we're gonna turn the bottom of it to the same diameter as the outer diameter of our piece here, okay? So while that's on the lathe, we're gonna turn that, then we're gonna drill the center of it. So we have a hole going all the way through. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna mate those two. And we're gonna take a little bit of wood glue. And for this, I'm just gonna put a little bit on my finger. And I'm gonna drip it all down the side of the piece. That's important. We're just gonna put a little bit of wood glue on that shoulder. Okay. If you wanted to use epoxy or something quicker setting, you could, but this isn't time sensitive right now. We're gonna do this, and then David's gonna bring me paper towels. So I'll take a clamp. Awesome, thank you. So we'll clean this up. And believe it or not, for what we're doing, it really doesn't even matter that this bottom piece gets anything on it. Okay. But we're gonna clamp this. Now remember, this is hollow, this has been drilled through. So I'm gonna ask David just to clamp that. And we'll set it aside, just give it enough time. For our purposes today, we'll just give it enough time to kind of set up. It doesn't need to fully cure, okay? And we're gonna cover that in one of the little sessions after we come back. So if now's a good time, if everybody else is ready, we wanna do show and tell, 50-50, whatever. I guess it'd be hard to do a 50-50, wouldn't it?
We are gonna have a raffle drawing.
Raffle drawing, whatever else we're gonna do, we'll take a little break. I'll reset up for part 2, and we'll kind of go from there.
Okay, cool.
So nod your head. Can you see my raffle? Okay. So here is everybody who signed up for the virtual meeting today, and we are, let's see, I think we are doing $20 to Arizona Carbide. Ken Easley. Mike Delaney. All right. My PowerPoint, and we're going to start with the slideshow.
Oh, background.
Okay, I'm finally there. Sorry, guys. Dave Dickmeyer. We're gonna unmute you, Dave, if you want to talk about your bowl here.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
We can hear you.
Okay, that's as far as I know, that's a mesquite bowl. I bought a small Nova mini lathe from one of your members, one of our members, who had to go back to Canada. So I have a mini lathe to work with, and he supplied a bunch of wood with it, and this was with it, a piece of wood. So I just tried to turn it, and I think it came out pretty decent. It's finished with walnut oil. It gives me something to do while I'm here for the winter. So it was enjoyable. I found out though that being from Indiana, I'm a little bit allergic to this mesquite wood. So without having too much of dust, I have a nice dust system back home in my shop, and even with a homemade mask. I kind of got a little bit throat scratchy from this dust. So I'm going to be real careful with this at home. I'll take some of this wood home and try it on my other lathe. So it was fun. And that's a beautiful hunk of wood. So I think it turned out pretty decent. So that's it. Thank you for showing it.
Sounds good, thanks. Andy, you're next up.
Hi, I was given this piece of walnut from a cabinet shop that had been sitting in their scrap pile for about 20 years. And it was all gray and warped and 4 inches by 2 feet by 3 feet. And it was a cutoff end that they were going to throw away. And so I talked them into not throwing it away. And I gave them each a bowl. And this was one of the leftover bowls that I made from that piece. I'm very happy with it. It's all finished in Liberman oil, about 3 coats. And it has a lot of chatoyance, and I was very happy with the way it came out.
Andy, you're one that talks about wanting to get back to the meeting so you can get into that instant gallery.
Yeah, I enjoyed the instant gallery, seeing everybody else's work, because it inspires me to try new things. I like that.
Sounds good. Thanks, Andy. So the next one is by Steve No. So we'll get you unmuted here.
Okay.
Steve, you're good to go.
Come on,
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
All right, good. Well, Andy, this one will give you something new to try also. And Dale, this is round, but it's not brown. The Dizzy Bowl's probably 20% turning and 80% cutting and gluing. This one's about 10 inches in diameter, 10.5 inches diameter at the top. There's 43 layers of rings in it. Each one is about 100,000th thick. And each one is made up of 112 different layers of wood. So I don't know what that all computes to, but there's 12 different species in it. And it's about 5 inches tall. The top layer is segmented, obviously, and then just a base on the bottom. Finished it with Waterlux. Designed it in Woodturner Pro. And I made all of these cuts with the AccuSlice machine on my bandsaw. So this is the 5th one that I've done. And that's given me something to, during lockdown here, to stay pretty busy with. And each one I've learned a few more things not to do. Some say that the first thing you learn when you make one of these is not to ever do another one, but they are kind of intriguing. So there you have it. That's what I've been doing.
Thanks, Steve. Richard, January, you have a couple of beads of courage boxes if you're good to talk.
I'm here. Getting ready for the fall, and decided I would get an early start on beads of courage boxes, and obviously would encourage others to do that for when we do those during the later meeting this year. This one is an ash bottom with a piece of mesquite on the top. Mesquite that's not supposed to crack when it dries, cracked. So we had to fill that with some coffee.
What, ready for your next one? Here's your next one.
Not sure what this wood was. Again, just getting ready for the fall.
Well, hopefully come fall, everybody will do lots of beads of courage boxes.
Now, to be honest, I've got 2 others that I got all the way down to hollowed out and was scraping the inside and blew them up.
Oh.
So, not without failures.
I think everybody relates to that. I'm gonna say we have Larry Juergens. Are you on there? Larry, we've unmuted you, but maybe you don't have a microphone. Yeah. Can you hear us?
It says I cannot unmute because the host shut me up.
Oh, no, I wouldn't do that to you. That was Dick doing that to you, Larry.
There, it looks like it did it.
There you go.
Okay. This is about a inch and a half by 10-inch piece of mesquite. I turn the back side and the front side, but leave the center in it. And then I airbrush it with about 10 different colors, starting with black, red, orange, blue, green, iridescent yellow, and then put a coat of lacquer over the top. Then I cut out the center, and I just finished that with Danish oil.
Wow.
That's about it. Made a second one today.
And you're still in Arizona?
I'm still in Arizona. Yep.
Will do. Sounds good. Well, we have a couple more here. So thanks. Thanks, Larry.
Okay, thank you.
Nora's ready. Is the next one. I didn't need him.
Yeah, hi, Pat. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. This is a small vase, probably 8 inches tall. I've been playing around mostly with some water-based acrylic paints, both on paper and on wood, and it's a good medium for both. And these roses were copied on from a pattern, and then I outlined them with piercing, and then after this piercing, I painted them with the acrylics, and it worked out, I thought, pretty well. I had a heck of a time with finishing, putting a finishing coat over the whole thing as protection. It got to some peau d'orange on it that I couldn't really sand out because I had didn't want to sand into the paint. So I just had to put in multiple more coats, and you could still see evidence in the highlights on this of the peau d'orange. But anyway, I got it about as smooth as I have had patience enough to do. So also, it's a fairly thin, probably a little thinner than I needed to be. It runs somewhere between 1.5 to 2 millimeters for the most part. And actually, after it was all finished and sitting on the shelf, it did develop a little crack in it on the opposite side of what you're seeing right now. But it's really, I don't want to hurt it, get stains on it or anything from putting glue in them. So I just left it. It's a mantelpiece thing for us anyway. That's it.
Thank you much. Frank?
Oh, you. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, the center one, the little blue one, is one that I did with the John Beaver. That's what they're going making the wave bowl, and so it's the guy used colored it a blue on the top with a white wave, and then on the bottom is the sand color. The one Lazy Susan is from reclaimed red oak, excuse me. Then they took some baseboard down, and so we pulled the nails out and made Lazy Susans out of them. And then the third one is hard maple and Paduke, and just I get an offset color and Those are all from my daughters. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. I gotta say, so we have a challenge next. We have Don Elliott, but we have 2 Dons listed on the board, so I'm not sure which Don is gonna talk, and we've unmuted both the Dons.
Well, this is Don Elliott. This was my first try at living with a maple platter.
I gotta say, first try is great. Did you want the next picture also?
Sure. I've got 8 grandkids, and I came up with the idea that I need to make something with 2 hearts intertwined. And this is whichever the 4th one is that gets married. They don't know who they are yet. This is out of a piece of mahogany. And I was going to do the basket weave around the outside edge, but the wife didn't think it was a good idea, so it looks like it does.
Thank you much. Dale, I gotta say, I think you should be unmuted, and you have the AAW Turning of the Week.
Yeah, a little story behind this piece. Last summer, my wife and I spent a few weeks up in the Northwest, and never missed an opportunity to go by a burl store. So I picked up this big leaf maple burl. It was a burl cap, actually. And then we went to a place, and I saw these granite rods, 2 inches in diameter. Had no idea what I was going to do with it, but I couldn't pass them up. So brought those home. They both kicked around for almost a year now. And so finally it struck me that I wanted to put the 2 pieces together, and this is what I ended up with. It actually is called, this piece I titled Well Balanced, which is the first time I ever put a title to a piece of anything. I had previously, I think, probably put 2 pieces on the gallery on the AAW site. And so I said, well, I'll put this one on just for kicks and see what would happen. And I was amazed. 2 days ago, I was going through my Facebook page and saw that I was selected for Turning of the Week. Couldn't believe it. Very humbled. So one never knows where these paths will lead to. Some of you probably have figured out how this piece goes together. If I could do, I don't think I can do my video probably easy. Can I, Pat, to free it up?
Yeah, we could.
If you want to try it, because I got the piece here, I was gonna show the members how it comes apart, if that's possible. If it's too much.
No, I just need to spotlight you.
Okay.
Okay, I think I'll take me off and we'll try spotlighting you.
Okay. I can see you.
I'm gonna say I've got 3 screens going here, so. I'll go over here.
I got it.
Here we go.
Go, Dale. Now share your screen.
Oh, share my screen.
On the same machine that you're watching this on.
Yeah, it's giving me too many messages. I don't think this is going to work out. Yeah.
If you just turn it and show the monitor, that might work too.
Can you see the piece?
Yes.
So as you can see, I started with a burl, and I really wanted to keep this edge or show as much as I could, and then just figure out some way to combine it with this granite rod. And some of you have probably seen the wine bottle holders that are counterbalanced. So as all this does is stick in the hole, and you cut an angle at the bottom and you put it about there, and there it sets.
Cool.
So that's how it came together. And again, you know, it's always amazing that how things come together sometimes. So I advise everybody who does a turning is to go in and put it on the AAW website and get some visibility and show off your pieces. Thank you.
Thanks, Dale. Okay, Pat, back to you.
Sounds good. Thank you. George Brill is next. We can. There we go.
Okay, thank you. That was inspired by John Beaver when I took his class, and I tried to get the upper piece to create the wave, but they cracked. The mesquite had some internal cracks and couldn't see it. And so I didn't want to throw the piece away because I loved the grain on it. And that's what I wound up with. It's about 7 1/4 inches by about 6 3/4 inches, with the high side being pretty close to 3 and about 2 5/8 or so for the low end. And the grain of that mesquite was just gorgeous. Like I said, didn't want to throw it away.
Thank you, George. Jim?
Hi, this is Jim Meiselas. This is actually a what do I do with something that everybody went home, and I made all the buttons for pendants. They do a lot of quilting we're in our park and stuff, and so I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, what am I going to do with them now? I can't give them to anybody. So the idea came up with a mobile, and they make real nice gift. The wood in them is actually scrap wood, and I mean pine, whatever was laying around. And then for the coloring, instead of using quote a paint, I used a stain that I got at Michael's, and that way you can see the grain of the wood. The one issue that I kind of figured out in this thing is on buttons is you drill the holes, you center it and you drill the holes before you turn it. That way they're all balanced in the, 90 degrees offset, and then they're all in the same circumference. That's it.
Thanks, Jim.
Oh, one thing else is I can't get my video to work here, and if somebody knows or having problems getting their video to work, we can do something afterwards in the chat, but I can't find what's wrong. That's
okay.
it.
But you can see everybody. We just can't see you.
Yeah, I can see everybody, and I can people. That is the other thing I thought. People be careful because your camera's after, and if you're like touching your face and other things, I can see it.
Yep, that's right. Everybody's when they're on camera. Thanks, Jim.
You bet.
Richard Slosky?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So I didn't know we were going to talk about these today. I thought there was kind of a show, but I recently got a Lyle Jamison hauling tool, and this is probably my third piece, one that actually came out. So I think it's olive wood. It's about 9 inches high. It's drilled from the top and hollowed from the bottom. And there's enough grain type stuff going on the bottom that it's pretty hard to tell where it was hollowed from. And it's got a few bark inclusions with some coffee filled and CA glue stuff over it. It's finished with Danish oil and polyurethane.
And you had one more, I think.
Yeah, another hollow form. not sure what the wood is, maybe acacia. Anyway, hollowed from the top, from the top there. It's about what, 4 inches in diameter, 3 inches, or 4 inches high, 3 inches diameter. Again, finished with Danish oil and polyurethane.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Rob Carlton, I think you are next. There you go.
Hello. So I'm assuming you could hear me. This was, I honestly, I have no idea what it is. I believe it is spalted maple, but I'm not 100% positive. It was something that was left over from a father-in-law that I just saw it sitting on something. I was bored, so I made a bowl out of it. It's more of a plank of wood, but it's pretty interesting. Has a nice figure. And then this is the maple burl, which was just a lidded box I made. Again, leftover stuff just laying around. I don't know. Fit together fairly well. It was a little too tight when I originally did it, but other than that, it works pretty good.
Thank you. I guess I have the pictures backwards on your.
That's all right. I'm fine. It's good. It's all good.
Sounds good. Thanks. So we have a couple things that were in process that people were working on, and I just couldn't resist adding them to the end. So here's my husband.
Yeah, we have 3 computers going here, so I'm going to talk really loud so you can hear me on Pat's computer. Just before the governor shut everything down, Jim and Sandy and Pat and I went to Globe because there's a lady up there that had a bunch of juniper trees and a mulberry tree that she wanted taken out of her yard. And we went up on a Sunday afternoon and were able to get most of a juniper tree and part of the mulberry tree. And we're going to have a work party go up later on and get the rest of them. However, I ended up with part of the stump that was about 20 inches in diameter, the hunk I got right now, and there's still more of it left there. So I cut a slab off of it, and I'm going to turn this end grain. It's on the lathe now, it's 17 inches in diameter, and it's about 4 inches thick. And we put it out on Facebook, and I had some suggestions of what maybe to do with it. I'm going to leave as much as the natural edges and the inclusions and everything in it that I can. So when it gets all done, hopefully it doesn't harm me in the process of doing this, but it's probably going to just kind of be a platter, and we'll leave it kind of looking the way it is and see what happens with it. So that's what I've got on here today.
You got me back. Okay, Jim. Jim, can you talk?
Me?
Jim McCleary.
Click on the mute.
Yeah, you're
Is that
good.
better?
You're good.
Okay. I had a guy contact me, and he says, well, I need a big pedestal turned for my table. And he's a contractor, and I guess it's for a customer. And he said, I said, how much would you charge me? And I just rattled off. I said, well, give me a couple hundred. I think I can do that. How hard can it be? Well, he drops this blank off. It is 18.5 inches across, 28 inches long, and it weighs 108 pounds. And when I saw that, I says, holy cow, that thing is huge. And then you can see the little base that goes on the bottom. I sent you a picture. I texted you a picture, Pat, of what I've got it down to. I guess maybe you didn't see it.
We'll add it to the newsletter, so we'll have the.
But I put that on my lathe. I finally got it round, and I could only get it up to 350 RPMs. And I said, well, it's alder, and it's just really terrible on the end grain. It just tears up. So Dick was telling me to put some weight on my lathe, and so I had a little bit weight, and I got it up to 650 RPMs, and I went to turn it down, and the thing just started freewheeling. So I got a hold of Gerard. He's got a big Nichols lathe, which used to be the club lathe, and I took it down there and have got it somewhat sculptured out into something that kind of looks like a pedestal. So, so it's one of those things you gotta kind of look at a project before you give them a price, because this one definitely shocked me. And I said, well, I'm going to do it just to see if I can do it. So it's been quite a challenge.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jim. Before I turn it back over to Jerry, I just had a couple things. I wanted to make sure people knew about the chat, because you can, depending on your system, you can save it at the end. So if there's people have putting suggestions out there as far as like to use guitar wire or Scotch-Brite pad to make a instead of sandpaper. So there's different things out there on the chat that people are talking about. So you can go and look at the chat, and you can at the bottom of the chat there, I think there's like 3 dots, and you can click save, and then that will save that chat so that you can actually read it at a later date, or if you want any of the information out of there. So I just wanted to make sure you knew about that. The club is recording this, and hopefully at a later date it'll be available to you. You do have a recording option, but it's turned off for all the members, but it is we are recording it, so I wanted to let you know about that. So I think Jerry, is it back to you?
Yeah, we're ready to go. So do the raffle later.
Okay, sounds good. It's back to you.
Thank you.
And we're back. Hi.
Actually,
we're not back.
I heard me back.
To the,
Now we're back.
Sorry, couldn't resist. Okay, so we're back. So I'm going to switch now. We're going to do a little bit of inlay with some CA glue. There's a lot of different ways to do this. Again, you can use epoxy, which I've used on a lot of other things before. There's about 1,000 different things you can mix into it. There's about 1,000 different ways you can make a place to put it. I'm going to cover about 3. So I hope, again, you'll take this as springboard. The first thing I'm going to do, I just took that same piece of P2 that we did all the burning on, and I turned to clean area. So we've got a little canvas to work on. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a Dremel, a little carving tool, and I've just got a little carving head on there. There's about 1,000 different carving heads. I just picked one for today, and I'm just going to make some random designs here. So I'll come in, maybe a little angle. This is kind of a square tool. It's much better if you can do it consistently. Maybe we'll come off this way, cross it. Maybe we'll just a big cross. We can probably do something a little fancier than that somewhere. And then on top of that, maybe we'll just do a couple of little holes around. This doesn't, you can certainly be fancier, you get the idea. So we've given ourselves a recess, and essentially all that is. Now, I have got about 40 different things for infill that we can use. We've got brass powder, we've got copper metallic dust, we've got copper powder, we've got bronze powder, we've got different nuggets and different stones and turquoise and all sorts of things. Why don't we use, this is kind of a copper colored grit. There's a little grit to it, not a pure powder. I'm going to pour some out in a little cup here just so it's easy for me to get out of the bag. Little nuggets, if you will.
How badly do you need that overhead?
I don't.
Does that turn it off? Yeah. We'll get a lot better resolution.
Yeah. This is kind of big. This is kind of chunky. I'm going to rethink that. I'm going to get more of a powder. That's a turquoise. Let's see if no. Sorry. I keep looking at this going, what's going to show up
What about the blue?
good against that wood? It's not a nugget. It's more of a powder. So I didn't go very deep on these, so I want something very, very powdery. Let's take this. Yeah, this will do it. So we're just going to take this and we're going to fill this in. You can buy these powders just about any wood supply store. You can also take minerals and crush them down yourself. You can get them to a really fine powdery consistency in a coffee grinder. I recommend you find a coffee grinder at a Swap Mart or a
Don't use your walls.
garage sale. Yeah, please don't use that one. And if so, I'm not the one that told you to do it. Just going to throw that out there because I guarantee you will receive some pushback for that. Let's see, I've got a little bit of black. That might contrast that really good. That, a little bit of that, just to give it a little bit of contrast. Okay, so we've got most of these little deals filled in. Now we're going to take our CA glue, and for this I recommend a thin because you want this to penetrate. You want it to go all the way in. So just take a little bit of CA glue. We're just going to drip it. And the bad part about this powder is it's so fine. It takes this thing a while to seep in here. So I've got a cover. I don't know if you can see it. I've got a black plastic bag on the ways of the lathe. So in case we drip anything, and in case we do drip anything, or in case anything sticks you don't want to stick, drawing a blank. Solvent, super glue solvent.
Acetone.
Acetone, thank you. Have a little acetone standing by. Yeah, this copper powder is so thin and fine, it doesn't want to absorb any of the CA glue. So we may.
Why don't you put the CA glue in before the powder?
Because then it'll just sit on top.
Okay.
So here's what we're going to do. Yeah, we're just going to work it down in a little bit. Let's work this down in. And now we're going to take some of the stuff that's not quite so fine that we talked about before, this kind of granular, if you will. Get that in there. I know, we can hear music here. Neighbors are having a party. So we're going to add a little CA over the top of that. And you may need to do this in several phases because some of it may wash a little bit of this out of the crack, and we put a little more in. The other thing that I will caution you, we're going to take this off of the lathe and let it set up in just a second. If you do not make 100% sure that your CA glue is set, because we're not using an accelerator right now, when you do this, accelerator is great. The problem is if you want it to show, accelerators oftentimes will leave the CA glue cloudy, and you don't get as clean of a look. However, I've made the mistake before of thinking my CA glue was dry and turn the lathe on to about 3,000 RPM, and you got super glue in your face, on your hair, on the lathe, on the ceiling, you name it. Nobody else has ever done that before, I'm sure. So we're gonna fill in those cracks. We're gonna put this aside, and I'm gonna bring another one up. And I want to talk about a slightly different technique. So let me swap out pieces here really quickly. And I'm just going to leave this in the orientation it's in and set it off here on the table for a second. All right. So now, move that around. I'm going to pull that out. Little hint, if you go back and forth between something you're using the tailstock for and something you're not using the tailstock for, either pull your live center out or have one of those fancy tilt things that gets it out of the way. Otherwise, you wind up with a pierced elbow. Again, I'm not going to tell you how I know that. So all I'm going to do here, and I'm just going to do this with a parting tool. This is the only one I brought with me. It's actually an old Craftsman that I reground to match the jaws of my dovetail. And that's not real true from last night either, but I just want a little groove in here. And I just want to come in, and I don't have to go very deep. Probably a little deeper than I need to go, but that's okay. And I'm going to undercut it just a touch, because I think it has a tendency to stay just a little better. If you can see that tool, wipe the gunk off of it. That tip is just at a slight angle, and it's a little blurry. It's hard to see.
Hold it close to the piece.
I'm going to shut the piece off. That helps, so it's not trying to focus on something moving. Yeah, there.
It's just a bigger mass.
It's hard to see, but there's just a slight pitch to that comes real close to matching the jaws of my dovetail. It's just the one I used. So now we've got the groove cut in the top of this piece. I'm going to take it off the lathe. I'm going to set it here. Now I'm going to take some large nuggets, and I'm going to purposely use some contrasting colors. If you really wanted to get fancy on this, use complementary colors. You can really make some pretty stuff. I'm going to purposely use stuff that I wouldn't normally use because I want you to see the contrast. This is amethyst. It was until the cork broke off. Dale?
Here, I'm gonna.
If you had half a brain, you'd be dangerous. So while she's doing that, we'll see if I can, the blue topaz cork came out easily. So I've got some blue topaz nuggets. And I'm going to fill those, drop those in a little bit. Perfect, thank you. Now I'm going to take the amethyst.
I'm gonna go grab the Ziploc bag.
And I'm going to drop these in. You'll notice it's not coming anywhere near filling up this channel, and that's okay. We've got some stuff spread out. Okay, so now I'm going to take that same CA glue and I'm going to go around here. And I'm just going to make sure we get all of those taken care of, okay? Now I've dropped enough CA glue around there. Gonna let that dry for a second. Now.
So Dale,
Yes.
people aren't not going to the bathroom. They're watching you all the time. So when you get to a 5 or 10 minute break, they want to take a break.
Oh, all right.
Or whatever point, doesn't have to be right this second, but whatever makes sense.
All right, well, that's flattering, I guess, I think. Thank you. So let's do this. Let's put this piece back on the lathe. I think we're dry. Let's see where we're at. Again, you may have to do this a couple of different times. See if we're dry enough. And I'm just gonna scrape this a little bit. I'm not gonna turn it. I'm not gonna cut, I guess I should say. It's a better way to put it. I just wanna scrape the top layer off. And since this has moved a little bit, turn the speed down. Yeah, that's moving quite a bit. See if I can figure out why. Bring it this way just a hair. See if we can get it to run just a touch over. Come on. Come on, there we go.
We'll use tail stop too.
I'm gonna put, even with a small piece like this, I'm a tailstock support kind of guy. It's a small piece, it's well secured in the chuck. I'm not that worried about it. I just like that extra little sense of security. It doesn't have to be super tight, it's just snug. That's truer. Okay. So, just use my spindle gouge. Always turn the lathe off before you adjust the tool rest. Put that up to a pretty good speed. And I'm just going to come in with the wing, very close flute, because this is hard stuff. See where we're at. That right away took the edge off the tool. Starting to get there. Starting to get there. Let me take just a little more off. All right. We're getting the idea. So there's some divots we missed, but there's a combination of blacks and reds in there. So why don't we do this? Let's take a break. Everybody take a break. I'm gonna fill this in with something else, maybe contrasting, just so we can see how we do it in layers. Then while we're off on that break, this CA has started to set, still a little bit runny, but I'm gonna start filling this in with different textures and essentially different grits. So we got nuggets here. I'm going to go something with a little more granular, a little finer in grit, and start filling in the missed pieces, okay? And then when we turn all this away and turn the residual away, it's going to reveal the different layers of stuff. So why don't we do that? Take a quick break. I'm going to continue working on this stuff, and I'll show you the results when we get back. Cool. Take a break.
Jerry? I think we're going to unmute everybody if we're going to take a little break here for a few minutes, and we'll see how everybody does as far as you'll be able to hear everybody's noise. But we're going to unmute if any of you want to do a little talking for this 5-minute break.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not too bad if you go thin. This is still wet.
Pat, this is Brian Linsink.
Hi, Brian.
How are you?
Okay, anybody working on any projects they want to talk about during the 5-minute break here?
I've been turning a bunch of old wood that I had laying around. This is a piece here. I don't know if you can see it that I just turned, which is out of carob.
I'm going to say,
Wood. Oh, there you go.
There you go.
There, I can hold it back here like that there. So this is a piece of carob that I turned. Ooh, turned out pretty good.
Nice.
A bunch of olive wood, which is all irregular, trying to figure out how I want to do it. And I make a bunch of cuts in order to do it. There was a green olive wood that I had gotten, and it tends to crack on you as you're turning, so I'm keep filling it.
It's on my computer.
If it's on your computer, then go ahead and share the screen.
Whoa.
Is it, can you see it?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
This is what they call a basket of illusion or basket illusion piece. And it's about 11 inches tall and about 10 inches in diameter. It's beaded on the horizontal, about 80 rows, and then it's burned on the vertical, and to create the little squares.
Pat, you still here?
And then you paint it with India ink pens. The core, the main vessel, is segmented hard maple.
Wow. There's some people who are really into this.
Beautiful. Beautiful, Brian.
Gorgeous.
Very nice. Very nice.
Gorgeous.
How many hours do you have in that?
Oh gosh, you know, I
About 2.5, right?
I can't count that high. No, it's probably 40, 50 hours.
Wow.
That's great.
All put together.
That's gorgeous.
And I've got one other one that I could pull up real quick. How do I get this one off? Do I?
It's whatever is on your screen we're going to see.
You're going to what?
We're going to see whatever is on your computer screen.
Oh, okay.
Another picture.
I'll I'll show you.
Whatever you show in between there is what you want to show people.
Yeah, I'll put one other one up here if I can.
Look at this one, babe.
Oh, wow, look at that.
Yeah.
There's another. This one is made the same way.
Didn't change.
It's not on there.
The picture hasn't changed.
Didn't change.
Oh,
It is a lot like the other one.
Yeah.
Exactly like the other one.
Well, how do I get that old one off, I wonder?
Oh, we got you now.
Okay. Well,
So
now
try
now
sharing
I'll,
screen with
there, here we go.
Oh, wow.
Beautiful.
Oh, man.
Oh, there it is.
Very nice.
And that one has this top is threaded.
Well, I just came up
It's
with that.
African blackwood, so it could be an urn,
Yeah.
but it's made the same way.
Damn.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Did you use a beading tool on that to get them all the same?
sure did.
Yeah, it's the beading tool, that same one that Dale has been using to score
great.
his lines. It's a beading tool made, the beads on this one are 1/8" beads. And there's about, again, 80 or 90 of them around the whole bowl. And then you burn in the groove of the beads with a wire, except for in the area that,
The time it took.
and then you use the linoleum again, or the masonite, formica, and burn them on the sides. And
Brian, what was your main wood that you started with?
it's the vessel is made using a segmented hard maple, and I make the segments as large as I can so that you pretty much lose any of the joints, either in the V of the bead or in the vertical lines. So and they're not, they get lost in the pattern as well. So you really don't tell, unless you look at the inside of it, that it's segmented. So that's
very
What
nice.
size is this piece?
I've been going on kind of a binge.
Yeah, I just set it in here.
I had one other that I could show real quick too, and there's another one.
There you go. Wow.
Very nice.
Another 2.5 hours.
Well,
I have a stupid question.
Yeah.
How do you get the burn lines perfectly spaced on the vertical?
Well, on the horizontal, the burn lines are done in the groove of the beads. So
I
those,
understand that one, yes, but
those are the
vertical.
easiest to get straight. And on the vertical, they're done with that wood burner. It's the same wood burning tip that Dale was showing you earlier today. And you burn each, first of all, you have an index wheel.
There you go.
For instance, this has 120 around it, 120 lines. And so you draw a line using your index wheel across the whole bowl with a pencil.
Okay.
And then you touch the top of each bead with that wood burner, and you try to keep the lines as straight as you can.
Okay.
They're not perfect.
They look perfect.
They look
But
darn near perfect.
a basket,
Close enough.
the lines aren't perfect either, so.
Beautiful.
Anyway,
It's gorgeous.
that's what I've been doing.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
I think we are back to Jerry.
Hi, we're back. Okay, so while we were back, I did what I told her. While we were gone, I did what I told you I was going to do. Brian's stuff, though, reminded me of kind of something that I wanted to touch on just a little bit on why I think I got into embellishing and why I enjoy it. I've tried those basket illusion pieces, and I emphasize tried. That's a lot of little tiny stuff, and my eyes just don't go there. But what I enjoy about this so much is I am not a sit still and relax and do nothing type of person. I kind of always have to be. As a matter of fact, it drives my wife nuts because I can't just sit and watch a TV show. I can't just sit and relax. I always have to be multitasking and doing something. So we go on vacation, we go camping, something like that, where we're going to be out. We enjoy taking our camp trailer up. I can sit outside the camp trailer underneath the awning. I can sit and burn on a piece. I can sit, and if I've set it up right and you've done all your layout lines and stuff with your indexing wheel on the lathe, you can sit and do the coloring with the India ink pens on basket illusion type pieces. We don't have a chance today to go into gold leafing because that's a whole hour and a half, 2 hour demo within itself. But stuff like that you can take a relatively small amount of equipment with you and still keep working on your pieces. And I'm kind of the type of personality that needs to do that. So it's one of the reasons I think I enjoy this so much. All right. So one of the things I did here, I went back and I got some brass filings, and I don't even know if it's real brass anymore. I don't know what they make house keys out of. But one of the things I did a while back is I took a little tiny container like this, just a little, you can get them at like jewelry stores and craft stores to hold little stuff in. And I went by Home Depot and I asked them in the key department for their filings, for the shavings that come off when they make keys. They thought I was nuts, but they gave them to me. They had to actually get permission, I think, for somebody to give them to me. But anyway, I put them in a little container. And so one of the things I did on that piece and on the other piece that I'm going to show you in a second is I used those just as contrast so you can maybe kind of see what's going on. Touching this, my hand's not sticking to it. Hoping we're dry. So I'm just going to scrape this. I'm going to use my scraper. I'm not after a real fine finish right now. I'm not after a real sandable finish. What I am after is to knock the chunks off, and this is hard on tools. And so I'll just scrape a little bit. This is kind of a left-handed inside curve scraper, but that's all right. It's going to dull the tool really, really, really quickly, but it's easier to sharpen this. Someone mentioned before that I didn't drop these down, and I apologize. You're 100% right. So I'm going to turn the speed of the lathe down. Yeah, it's still a little wet. So I'm just going to you can feel, almost feel when you're down to just the wood and when you're not. Let's take a look at that and see where we're at. All right, I think close enough to give you an idea. How's that?
Okay. So how much of that is the copper versus the
So
shavings?
the brighter colored stuff is all that copper powder. The more brassy bronze stuff we just put on top to fill in the holes. That's the key stuff. And then the darker red were those nuggets that we put in. So this is really rough. I wouldn't, if I was doing this probably for real, I would do the whole thing in like a copper or the whole thing in a consistent color would give you a much nicer finished product, but at least you can kind of get an idea. I'd also do I'm not a big carver, so if you've got a steady hand, you could probably carve something nice. The other thing you can do, and I will show you this just really, really quickly, is if you take this off center just a little bit, and we're going to take that off center, take our tailstock back up, support that, turn the lathe speed down, put my glasses on. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and take my spindle gouge and just come in with the flute closed. I'm just using the tip, and I'm gonna make a little groove from both sides. I might have gone too far. No, that's all right. So obviously I need to clean that up a little bit, but you get the idea. If I was to go in and fill this in now and then scrape it and clean that off, we would have just one side. It would look like we hand carved it when in fact we turned it a little bit off center. Okay? Everybody got that? Pretty comfortable with that? Let's move on to that other piece, because I want to get to the actual coloring. I want to give us enough time to do that. So this other piece, I continued adding jump to it, right? There's still a lot of grooves. We would still have a long ways to go. Again, I added a bunch of different colors, a bunch of different textures on purpose to kind of show you. The good news is we really need to sharpen that tool anyway. You guys are missing out. There's a beautiful aroma of CA glue. It's kind of permeated the Slocum shot here. All right. So again, we're going to have to turn away a little bit of this. I turned it a little deeper than I probably should have. But let's just, again, turn the lathe speed down. That's running fairly true for what we need to do right now. And we'll just shave away at this a little bit. Really light cuts, guys. Really light cuts because it wants to catch. Yeah, see our CA, our CA wasn't quite dry. It's in my throat. All right, I got an idea. Let's talk about something else for a second. Let's give that a few more minutes to dry. Let me get something to drink here because we put that on a little bit thick. All right, don't do what the dumb paramedic does. Okay, so let's go back to this piece. I do want to talk about this for just a second. If you remember, we turned this, we're pretending it's hollow, we put this neck on it. Now, if we just finished it like that, it looks pretty bad. It looks like exactly what we did. We turned a hollow form and we stuck a different piece of wood on it and drilled a hole down the center. Not very impressive at all. But if we were to do something to mask the bottom 2/3 of this, leave this as a very nice piece of wood, a burl, something with really pretty figure in it, whatever the case may be, we've drilled a hole in it. Now we're going to go through and we're going to taper that opening down into that hole we drilled to make it look like we hollowed the whole thing out through that little neck. So the ideal finish for this is that gold leaf, and I'll show you a little bit. So if you can just imagine an irregular kind of shaped edge. All right. I'm just going to draw an example on here with a pencil. Okay. If you see that, and then to illustrate the idea, sorry, give me just a second here. Talk amongst yourselves. Okay, so if we were to take some gold leaf, some copper leaf, some silver leaf, we were to prime this piece with some white pigmented shellac. I always color the underlayment. I usually use a black for like a copper. So if there's any splits in the leaf, then you see like a black underneath it. So we're going to put some white pigmented shellac on this to prime it. We're going to sand that smooth, 220, 320 grit. Then we're going to put black. I usually use a black lacquer. And then we're going to take our leaf, and I've brought a piece of leaf to show you how this will all shake out. I wish we had time to do the whole thing, but like I said, the adhesive takes so long to dry, and there's so much to this. But if you can get an idea, we would put the adhesive on it, the size on it, we'd let that dry, we'd come back, and we'd tamp this down. This would have an irregular edge. Let me tear this edge a little bit to show you here. You see how easy it tears, just like that, okay? So now we're going to come up and we're going to cover that neck and leave it irregular, and then that all gets tamped down like that. So when it's all said and done, what it does is it gives the illusion that this is all the vessel made out of the really nice burl, and then we've just covered part of it up, right? And nobody knows that we hollowed it through that hole or hollowed it out at the bottom, and that little tiny hole in the neck really has absolutely nothing to do with anything as far as the functionality or the way the piece was made, okay? And I know that sounds a little convoluted, but I want to give you an idea again. So we would take this, you could either leave it gold, or we could take chemical and patina it. And if you ever want to have me back, we can do a whole deal on gilding and patina work, because it's really fascinating to me. But that's another thing that you can do down the road. You can do this to an old piece to embellish it that you've had sit on the shelf forever, what have you. All right. All right. Now, I think what we're going to do is I'm going to switch gears a little bit while I still can. And how would you like to do the coloring? We'll come back to this before we end. We'll come back to this before we end and scrape that off. But I laid this on pretty thick, and I should have known better. It was my bad. So I want to talk a little bit about coloring and the way I do it. Once again, I have to give credit where credit is due. In this case, the majority of the credit goes to Jimmy Clues, because when I first joined this club, Jimmy Clues was the first professional artist I ever saw. And I had heard it was on coloring, and my first thought was, who the heck would want to color a perfectly piece of good wood? I was really upset that somebody would even do that. Then I went and saw Jimmy do it, and I saw what his finished pieces look like, and I kind of went, all right, I get that. Same thing with Molly Winton. I thought, who would want to burn? I'm not interested in that. And then I went and saw her do it, and then, all right, it's opened my mind a little bit. So when I talk about the types of wood, lighter woods, it stands to reason, but people have tried to color darker stuff. It just doesn't work out. Lighter woods, maples, sycamores, things like that tend to work better. The other thing is very highly figured woods work better. And again, that pushback is, well, why would you want to cover that up? We're not covering it up. We're going to enhance it. And I hope by the end of the piece, you'll see that. If you were to take a plain piece of wood, let's just cover up some of this figure and find a piece that's just a plain piece of wood, and you color it. It'll look like you smeared color on a plain piece of wood. And I've seen pieces done like that that just don't look good, all right? They look like somebody just took a plain piece of wood and colored it. So what we're gonna do is, you can see on here, you see all this figure. You got the grain running this way, then you got the figure running this way. Well, what happens essentially is when this wood is growing, the grain, as the little tubes, as they're growing, the grain lays over one way or the other for one reason or another on its side. And so you get all these different little undulations in the wood. Whether that be, whether you call it quilted, whether, there's different patterns to it and different names to each pattern. You've got quilted, you've got the waterfall stuff, you've got bird's eye. But anyway, it will enhance those particular things. Now what I've done is I've turned a little bowl. On the back side, there's just a little OG shape, okay? Normally what I would do is I would turn the back of the bowl first, I would sand it, and I would finish it. And I would probably use like a light spray lacquer, and several just light coats with a very, very light sanding at the end. And the reason is, where this gets pretty thin, and I've got it pretty thin at the rim here, I really don't want anything bleeding through, okay? I don't want it to ruin the back of the piece and have somebody look at it and go, that was neat, except it all bled through and looks like crap, okay? So what I've done is I've turned the rim, which is really where we're going to concentrate. And for our purposes today, the rim is what's important. I sanded the rim to 600. I didn't bother even sanding. I scooped out some stuff in the center. You can leave it if you want. The only reason I don't like leaving it is because we're going to get our fingers in here. And I don't like hitting that rim if you still leave that proud, protruding. We're still going to turn a lot away from here. So if some color bleeds down into the center, I've still got a lot of meat in here. I can finish turning the center section of that bowl away. All right? Everybody with me there so far? Good. So I'm going to move this stuff out of the way. I'm going to take my handy dandy live center away. Again, matter of fact, I don't need that anymore. Drop that in the bucket. And I'm going to put some gloves on. And I'm going to talk about the colors, okay? Now, we can do a couple of different color patterns. We can use blues and greens and yellows, or we can use reds, oranges, maybe a little bit of purples, things like that. Somebody wants to weigh in and give me a preference. If not, I'll pick a preference. I'm gonna move this out of the way. I don't need this right now. I've got a bag here covering the ways of the lathe so we don't mess up the lathe at all. Either way, regardless of what, now, a little bit about color before we get into this. There's a lot of different colors out there. These are alcohol based, okay? You can use powders and mix your own. There's tons of stuff out there. The ones I use are actually manufactured in Europe. There's a place in Texas that imports them. They're pre-mixed. You can dilute them a little bit if you want, but they come out great just right out of the jar. And a little goes a long way. The jars, I think, are like a half a pint. And I do quite a few of these pieces, and I bought a 10 color set or something like that. And I've had them since the National was here. So 4 years, 3-4 years ago, whenever the National Symposium was here, I bought them from a vendor that was here, and I haven't even gone through half of them yet. So regardless of what color we use, we're going to start with black. And I know that sounds a little strange, but there's a method to my madness. What black is going to do, when all is said and done, is going to give it depth. If we just used, the reds and oranges or the blues and greens, we could still make a pretty piece, not an issue. But it wouldn't have the depth we're going to try and achieve. So what I've done, purple, where's my black? Green, blue, orange, red. There. Okay. So what I've done is to decant them, and I'll show you these other little containers in just a little bit. I want to get quite a bit of this on there. This is a little bit cool. Oh, there it is. Hold on. I want to use a different black. I thought something was a little bit wrong. That's my ink. So I decant them into these little deals. That way, if they spill, it's a much smaller opening, much less to worry about. Just put a little on the rag, and I want to cover it pretty good. There. And that's our black. Did you see that? Okay, thanks. Demo's over. No. We're gonna let that dry. We're gonna let that dry for just a second. I'm gonna make sure it's dry. And the alcohol still left on there would flame off just a little bit. It didn't. So we're dry. So now I'm going to go back to 150 grit. I sanded this smooth because I wanted those pores tight. I didn't just leave it at 150 grit and do this, even though we're going back to it, because the more you sand, the more it tightens up those pores.
It's not plugged
Oh yeah, that's my Dremel. It's still plugged in. Thank you. That would have been taking a long, but we can still sand it that way. It would have just taken a lot longer to do. Okay. I'm getting there, thank you. I'm getting there. We don't need to go super fast here. But I'm gonna sand a good bit of this off. See where it's still staying in between there, but it's leaving all this figure open. So I want to sand a little more of that off because I want some of that to come off. All right. A little more. I want to take a little more of this off, but I'm liking all this. It's going to add some depth by the time we're all done. So. The other thing I'm doing, I'm using a very, very soft. This is about to come apart on me. It's may come apart on me before we're done. I do have a backup. Yeah, that's all she wrote on that one. All right, that's okay. It's about where I like that. Did we decide whether we want blues and greens, or do we like reds and oranges?
There's one comment that says blues rule.
Blues rule? All right. If only one person's going to comment, that one person gets it.
I say blues and greens.
All right. So we will do blues and greens. I'm going to.
Second was the blue.
All right, all you red people slacking on me. I like reds, but that's okay. Not about me. So I'm just gonna, without turning it on, I just wanna. All right, perfect. I'm gonna take that off and I'm gonna go to a 220 grit. Have that ready to go now. I'm going to start with our blue. Now we have a royal blue and we have a blue. I'm going to skip the royal blue since we went with the black already, but you could use a royal blue as an underlayment as well and it would give it some depth. I'm going to use the lighter blue. We kind of want to work darker to lighter and we get a fresh cloth. And again, I'm going to go over the whole thing. I'm not gonna be choosy on this. Again, this is kind of one of those go over the whole thing. And the nice thing about it is you can always sand this off or turn it down a little bit and start over again. Let's get that on there good. So already you can see where the black is adding dimension as opposed to if we had just, if you look at there, as if we'd just gone straight to the blue. So make sure all that alcohol's dried, and it has. Doesn't take long for that alcohol to dry. So now we're going to take 220. We've got 220 on the sander, and we're going to again cut this back. We don't have to do near as much. Cut that back just a little more. Yeah, okay. Now we'll take a green. And let's see if we can do the green. Now the green, I'm not going to put all over the place. I'm going to start to stipple. And here's what I mean by that. I'm going to take my cloth. I'm going to fold it a couple times so I get kind of an edge. And that's where I'm going to put my color. And I'm left-handed. I'm doing this with my right hand, so I'm going to start. Need more color on the.
Dale, do you ever dilute your dyes?
Do I ever dilute them?
Yes.
No. I use these straight out of the bottle the way they are. The powdered ones you can. I mean, I think they're pretty the way they are. The powdered ones, like I say, you can mix to your satisfaction the way you like it.
There's a question about the brand name of that material and the name of the distributor in Texas.
I will remember it. And it has it on my sheet, so if I forward that sheet on to Pat, and she can distribute it or put it on the website or whatever she wants to do, It's on there, and it's also, if you go to jimmyclues.com, it's the stuff that he actually likes. So now I've got a little green, but I got some sharp lines here, so I didn't wipe it off. I got some sharp lines. So I'm actually going to take a little denatured alcohol in a spritzer, and I'm going to kind of spritz this a little bit. And then I'm going to dab this and blend those lines a little bit. You can see a little bit's kind of coming off. Okay, so blend this just a little bit with some DNA. Flash the rest of that off. Okay. And that's where we're at so far. We've got black, blue, and green. So now I'm going to sand with 320. And every time I sand, this is getting a little lighter, a little lighter. I'm not sanding real heavy. I just want to expose some grain for the next color. Okay. All right. I got some stuff on the outer edge I don't like. All right. Next. Let's do a little yellow. Okay, so let's get some yellow. And again, I want to stipple in. In a few different places here. I don't want to really leave any wood showing through. Okay. And then while we're here, before I sand any more, I'm also going to take a purple and just find a clean edge of the cloth here. And again, just real light, doesn't need a ton. I'm just going to stipple with the figure. And I know that's a little dark, but just wait. We're going to blend it in. And this just comes back and adds just a little more depth.
And this will color what that is.
This is the purple. And let's take a little bit of that purple off and blend that because I'm not real little bit was all right. Some of it's a little too heavy. We're going to pull some of that back off. And then I'm going to go back to the yellow just a little bit more and fill in just a little tiny bit of highlights. And I might even have enough on the, yeah. So as you can see, and we could have started with the royal blue, we wound up with more purples than I think in greens than blues. But that's why this is such a big experiment. We can blend that just a little bit so we don't have such harsh lines.
Is there any key to the sequence of adding colors?
Usually laying down the darker colors works better than laying down the lighter colors first. So laying the dark, but other than that, no, once you get into the light ranges, whether you want to do, you know, a light blue before a green or green before a light blue, no, it's just a matter of experimentation, okay? So what I told you, I'm gonna do something on purpose, kind of just what I told you here. So we get some stuff on there and we miss. Now to finish this piece off, I would take some black and do a couple of things here. We'll take a little bit of black. And remember, I would have finished the back of the piece first. I told you I would have finished that. I would take black and do the rim in black. And what that does is it just frames it a little bit. It doesn't leave it kind of hanging out there.
You're worried about clean edge, or you go back and turn that?
You can go back and turn that, sand that. Realistically, what works even as well here, or even better, is a Sharpie. I just did it with this today to kind of give you the effect of framing it. But if you take a Sharpie and brace your hand against either the tool rest or the headstock of the lathe and just turn it very slowly and turn across like that, you won't get any bleed at all. And it stays permanent. So, all right, let's get the tool rest back here. Let's clean up that center just a little bit. And I'm not even going to do the whole thing. I'll just loop's closed. All right. Not a perfect finishing cut. I've got a few ridges in there, but the point is it cleans up that edge, cleans up all that bleed over. Nice, another finishing cut. And a little bit of sanding, it'll be done. Now, to finish this, you got a couple of options. Good old Danish oil. Danish oil, I think, in my opinion, works fantastic. Works probably just as good as any other finish out there. Let me put a little oil on it. And you can see I got a clean cloth here. And you will see the kind of the colors pop. And the bad news is it takes several layers of this, several applications to really see what the final colors look like. But there, how's that? You can see the different lines of figure and the different layers of color. Okay. The other thing you can do is a light spray lacquer. About 6 light coats of spray lacquer. About every 3rd coat, really light sanding. And then if you take Meguiar's polishing compound and polish it off at the end, it'll look like glass. So give that just a nice shiny finish there. And there you have a little more greens than blues, but there's some blues in there. I don't know if the camera shows them as well, but there's definitely some blues in there. All right. Questions on that? None. All right. Glad you guys are helping me out with the questions, making me work for it. All right, let's go back to our last deal. We'll finish this up.
So there is one question maybe that I don't want to ask.
Oh, don't be shy.
System dialog displayed. Enter password. You are currently on a text field. To enter text in this field, type. This is a secure text.
Okay. That was her shot.
Huh.
She had her hand up.
Oh.
But, and I turned her mic on. And
Don't be shy, because we can't see you.
actually,
Yeah, we can, okay, but I can't. They can.
yes.
No, I would much rather have y'all ask questions, because if not, I got a tap dance for the next 2 minutes. All right, so I'm just gonna get my bowl gouge, my trusty go-to half-inch bowl gouge, and I'm gonna tear the garbage out of it. Trying to get down so where you can just at least see kind of what's going on here. So just a light cut. Zero edge left on that tool whatsoever.
So Dale, would carbide do any good here?
Yeah, I mean, this is a situation where actually I think carbide would do great. You can see where I've turned a little bit of that down. Let me get a scraper. I don't have any carbide, but oh, hey, you know what? Yes, I do. Look at that.
Just to see the surface. There you go.
I've got a carbide hollower, which is not exactly what this is designed for, but let's just see if I can get some of that off of there. Yep. Ooh, look at that bad baby. You can hurt somebody with that. All right, let's adjust that to a rest. All right, I think that's close enough. We still have some voids, but I think it's close enough. You can see the nuggets, you can see the different stuff filling in, and like I say, we use contrasting mishmash on purpose, and I would never do that on a finished piece, but I purposely wanted you to be able to see the contrast. If you wanted more, okay, more information on this, the expert on this is a guy named Stephen Hatcher. Okay, so if you just Google Stephen Hatcher, he does carvings that he fills in, but he purposely sorts his minerals by size of the nugget. He starts with the bigger nugget, sands it down, cuts it down, puts in the next size to form textures. And he has absolutely amazing pictures doing it. And this is just the idea, okay? The last thing I want to leave you with, and we did not have time to get to this today, I did a piece that wound up being published in the British Woodturning magazine. And I don't own the piece anymore, but I want to talk about the concept just a little bit, and then I will let you take it and run with it. So I have a long copper strip there.
So Dale, one person,
yes.
Jim Mizell's had an observation about the selection of materials you put in the try to match the hardness, you know,
like on the mineral Mohs hardness scale type of thing?
That type of thing, yeah. I mean, it's a good point.
That would be probably ideal. Much more in depth. I mean, if you have knowledge in that area, I think it probably would be easier. You're absolutely, and the question, if not everybody heard it, had to do with the hardness of the minerals and, you know, matching them and using all roughly the same hardness of mineral. And my response was, you're a lot smarter than I am when it comes to that area. But yeah, I think it's probably has some legitimacy to it, that if you're using all minerals that are roughly the same hardness, you're not going to get as much bounce and chatter. The tool's going to want to cut through them the same, you know. So whether that means you still, you know, wind up dulling your tool quicker or later, minerals are minerals, is still going to dull the tools fairly quickly, but I don't think you would get as much chatter and bounce like I was getting. So that's excellent. Hadn't ever thought of that, but yeah, much smarter than I am. All right, so I'm going to mount this last piece in the chuck just as a holder. I'm not going to actually turn it. I know we're running out of time, but I do want to at least talk about the piece. So I turned a piece of mesquite in a hollow form, and I wanted to do something with copper. So this piece has been plastic. It has some natural patina on it, so it's going to be perfect. So I went about 2/3 of the way up, just below the shoulder, about 1/3 of the way below the shoulder. And I cut a recess, roughly the same diameter as that, as the copper strip. This just happens to be a copper strip. that I was using. Before I hollowed this all, I left a chucking point on this upper third, okay? So I had it held in a chuck here, and I had a tenon turned here as a chucking point here. Because what we're gonna do is we're gonna cheat as we hollow this. So I turned the tenon the same diameter, or turned the recess the same diameter as this strip of copper, left the chucking point here. Then I buried my parting tool down the center of that strip. So I can just draw here. So if I turned, if that's the diameter of my copper piece, okay, and I turned that about 3/32 of an inch thick, not very deep, okay, so I turned that deep. Then I went in with my parting tool and I parted this as deep as I could get it. And that becomes important, okay, that taking that extra wood out of there becomes important. Then I went over to the bandsaw when I couldn't part it anymore, but I couldn't bury my parting tool anymore because it was a little bigger than this. I went over to the bandsaw. I put this in a V-groove jig so it wouldn't try and spin away from me on the bandsaw, and I finished cutting it all the way through. Now, essentially, I have 2 end grain vessels. So now we hollow the vessels out. So now I have a vessel, almost like a lidded box, that has a little tenon turned on it on the top. Okay, everybody with me so far on that? The last thing I do is to take a tiny, tiny, tiny little parting tool, like this. And all this is an Allen wrench. And I'm not good at this. There. A little Allen wrench that I ground just a little tiny nib in. Make sense? Okay. So now what I did, and I'll actually turn this part just to show you. I should do this just to show you so I don't have to describe it all. Oh, where'd that little parting tool go? Okay, so I turned, I parted, turned a recess like this. For that copper. All right, everybody with me so far? Then I took the center and I went all the way down, as deep as I could get. Then I took it to the bandsaw and cut it in half on the bandsaw. Everybody with me so far? Okay, now this needs to be just a little deeper to do what I was doing. About like that, okay? Now, I could go in here with this piece. I gotta turn this light on, I can't see. Sorry about the glare, but I need the light to see. So now I'm gonna go in, I need to raise this tool rest just a little bit for this tiny little piece. This is an Allen wrench stuck in the end of a drumstick, by the way.
So now is the big groove deeper than the thickness of the copper?
Yes, just a little bit, okay? So now I'm gonna go in and I'm going to make a groove. And yeah, there's a little torque here. But I'm gonna make just a little groove in there. And then when I turn this top piece, I'm gonna do the same thing, okay? So now I have essentially 2 vessels. They both have a tenon there, and they both have a little groove on the underside on each side, okay? Now, and I turned this a little shallow, but you'll get the idea. When I put these back together, this is gonna go down inside that groove, so it's gonna sit just below the surface of that wood, so it's buried, you can't quite see the edge, it hides it just a little bit. We go all the way around, I'm gonna measure, and I'm gonna get around, I'll do it this way so you can see better. I'm gonna measure, I'm gonna get here and I'm gonna cut. I'm gonna take a piece of snips, and I'm gonna cut this piece of copper right here. I'm going to let it overlap probably by 1/8 of an inch. Put this piece back on the top again in that groove. So now we have two separate vessels that are being held together by this piece of copper. Oh, one thing I should explain. Remember we had a chucking point here? We had a tenon here. Before I glue these all back together, I'm going to put this in a jam chuck. I'm going to finish this top because once we glue this in, there's not enough support there to turn that tenon off. So I'm going to get it all nice and finished. Okay, everything but the foot. Get it all nice and finished. Put that on there, glue it together, put a little bit of epoxy on there, clamp it, let it sit overnight. Okay? Now, we have a piece of mesquite. Mesquite was what I used for the original piece. We have a piece of mesquite with a copper band in the middle of it. The only problem with that, okay, the only problem with that is you can see where that joint, where they end up overlapping, or even if you don't overlap them, even if you butt them right up next to each other, you can see that. And that bothered the heck out of me. So what do we do about that? I made a couple, and I kind of evolved just a little bit. I'm not a big piercing guy, like a J. Paul Fennell piercing guy. That's just way, way, way too much engineering and way too much concentration for me. So here's what I did. I took a scrap of mesquite, very, very tiny sliver, like that big, okay? And I put it, and it's just as thick as the copper is recessed. So I glued it in so it covered the butt joint. Everybody with me? Okay. Now the problem is it looks like you have one piece of wood that covers a butt joint. So how do we get around that? I evenly spaced 4 more. So I had 5 evenly spaced vertical columns. And then I took my pyrography pen that we dealt with earlier, and I went a little bit above and a little bit below, and I pyrographed texture, solid texture around the whole thing and up and down those little beads. Everybody, or those little posts, okay? That was that finished piece, and that was okay. Still didn't 100% like it. So the next piece I did, I went a little bit deeper with this groove, buried the copper just a little bit deeper, turned a sleeve essentially. So a donut, if you will, that made up the thickness between the copper and here, and went through with a Dremel tool and pierced it. And put it all back together and glued it. You could never see a seam anywhere because your eye was captivated by the little tiny piercings. So we didn't have time to really get into that today because I covered other stuff and I probably covered too much stuff. But the whole idea was just to give you an overview of different things you can do, still wind up with a turning that looks like wood, and that you're not just slapping a bunch of paint over or something like that. So with that, thank you very much for staying tuned in.
What gauge copper that was?
Thin? I don't know. I mean, I really don't. I got this Phoenix Metal Supply. The Phoenix Metals is on, I want to say 48th Street, south of Broadway. It's down kind of by the entrance to Tempe Diablo Stadium. Down there. Oh, David's got a gauge here. We can, here, you want to do it?
20 thousandths.
20 thousandths, whatever that transfers to in gauges. It's 20 thousandths. But anyway, Phoenix Metal Supply, if you go down there, they're by the entrance of the Buttes Resort and the baseball stadium there by 48th Street and Broadway. They've got an array of any kind of metal you want, but they've got an artist corner where they take scraps and cutoffs that you can buy by the pound. So you can buy as much or as little as you want. And it's kind of like the bargain bin at some of the various wood stores around, the dollar bin and things like that. You just dig through, find something that suits you, and you can buy cutoffs by the pound. So.
Dale, the request came if you have a photo of that finished piece.
I do.
If you can send it to Pat, she can send it out, put it in the newsletter.
Okay,
Whatever.
absolutely. Real quick story on that piece, and I will shut up. I took that piece to the symposium I went to in Florida because I was going to put it in the instant gallery, and then I wanted some critiques on it. And there were some people there that I'd become friends with, you know, Jimmy and Molly and some of those people that I'd kind of become friends with that I wanted a true, honest critique because I was trying to do a whole lot better. And as I was showing it to Jimmy and we were talking about it and he gave me a few pointers and in general he said he liked it, he gave me a few suggestions. I'm like, okay, cool. The publisher, Mark, I forget his last name now, but his name is Mark. The publisher of British Woodturning magazine, who they had a booth there, came up to me and said, I would love to feature that piece. Would that be okay? And I said, no, I don't want my pieces featured, of course. I said, yeah, that'd be really nice. He said, I'm not exactly sure how I want to do it yet, whether I want to feature the piece or feature you or whatever, but let's stay in touch. So I kind of forgot about it. And a month or so later, I got an email from him. And he said, well, if you have any pictures of any other stuff, we'd like to do a little snippet on your shop and you. And so I got a little one-page little deal in Woodturning magazine that talked about that piece, a couple other pieces. And why they highlighted my shop that was stuffed in a one-car garage, I'm not sure. But they took a few pictures of my shop. And so that's where that piece came from. So yes, I will be happy to dig out a picture of that piece and send it to Pat along with the notes from today's stuff and the vendors and things like that. And my email's on there. My contact information is on the page. I'm not at a lot of meetings anymore just due to my work schedule, but there's nothing sacred. So I'm more than happy to share any information or anything I have. Shoot me an email. So.
Yeah, one other question came up had to do with maybe the hazardous nature of any of those rocks or minerals you might put in those grooves and then turn away and make dust.
Yeah, I mean, that's a valid point. I'm not the greatest at respiratory protection. I'm not the greatest at PPE, and I'll tell you what, I'll give you my last little snippet on PPE, and to whoever brought that question up, it's a valid point. If you're concerned about it, you should take the appropriate precautions. Here's my take on PPE from a firefighter paramedic standpoint, and then from a risk management standpoint. PPE is meant to be a last line of defense, not a first line of defense. Too many times, I think we rely on personal protective equipment and it gives us a false sense of security. Somebody gets electrocuted from doing burning because they're wearing a pair of gloves and they think that isolates them from 20,000 or 50,000 volts. Knowledge is your first line, so know what you're working with. Information is so readily available. You want to know what happens when turquoise turns to dust or something like that. But above that, I would say engineering controls. So, like I said, I keep a fan pointed away from me to draw the smoke away from me when I'm doing pyrography. Maybe if you're turning something like that, keep a fan blowing on you to blow the dust and stuff like that away from your face. I don't like respiratory protection. I know it's necessary a lot. It was necessary in my job. I don't like stuff over my mouth. So if I'm sanding a lot, if I'm turning something really fine at home that becomes a powder, something super dry, or if I'm sanding a lot, then yes, I have a mask with a reusable filter that I do wear. And the reason I do that is because for years I turned without, and I love to turn mesquite and acacia on a lot of the local stuff here. And I realized when you sneeze 3 days later and it still smells like mesquite, it's probably not really good on your respiratory system. So from that standpoint, I've kind of forced myself. Something small like this, something light, no. Where I should have done it and where I overstepped the line was I turned that piece too quick before the CA glue had completely set up, and that was not good of me, because that stuff will harm you over the long run. So, all right, other than that, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate you staying tuned in. I know it's a little something new with it is new for us here too, and really new for whoever's gonna, if we can't get back to normal by next month, good luck to whoever stands up here, because it is different without that live feedback. I need people sitting in the front row throwing things at me and giving me a hard time. But hope you all enjoyed it. Thanks.
Thanks, Dale. So Pat, if you want to take it, go ahead.
Okay, so here are the people that were in the instant gallery. We're gonna spin it, and we have 2 drawings here. So Jim, you got gift certificates coming your way, and we got Rob. So we'll send out the gift certificates to you. That's not a problem. I'm going to unmute everybody. Maybe we can give them a round of applause.
Hey, Dale.
Good job.
Nice job.
Bye-bye.